بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين.
اللهم صل على
اللهم
محمد
صل
وعلى
على محمد
محمد.
وعلى Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Wa
And
alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
yeah, thank you so much. So Brother Abbas Kanji is with us, and I have sent out a brief bio from the Unity Academy website for everyone to read. The participants, Abbas, I don't know if you've seen any of the other episodes, but the idea is these guys are either like upper high school or in college, and the idea is to just expose them to careers and kind of see different career paths from the lenses of people who are also devout Muslims, so they can get a sense for their opportunities and then pitfalls, learn from your experience, and you can kind of also give them advice that you've gleaned throughout the years, and like, would you do what you did over again? Is there something you do better? Things like that, so they can just benefit from the wisdom that's in our community.
Inshallah. Sounds like a plan.
So yeah, we can start from like what you do now, or if you want to kind of give us a story of how you got there. Either of those two would be a good
Absolutely.
starting point.
We'd love to do that. So I think we'll start about how I got here. So I was like most of our young friends here. I went to high school here in the Chicagoland area. I went to New Trier, which is a high school in Winnetka, so about 45 minutes from here. When I was in high school, I think like many children in our community, was just dreaming of being a physician in terms of career. And I applied to schools that were in our neighborhood, and I was fortunate to get into Northwestern University. I went there as a pre-med student, but also majoring in economics. And I went through the course load and the MCAT, everything that was required to apply for med school, I did. Organic chemistry and all those wonderful courses, which I know everyone has heard about. But when I was a senior in college, I met some brothers from our community, actually, who were in the field of management consulting. And when they described to me what they did, I found it quite interesting. And up until then, I never even considered anything except for being a doctor. And I said, you know what, let me just try this. And my parents were okay with it, with the understanding that, okay, you can try something, but then you'll go to med school. And so I interviewed for jobs after, or in my senior year of college, and got several offers, and I joined a management consulting firm. And I joined them, and this was something that no one had done in my family or in our close friends. It was something very different. And really what that job was is, and I'm sure you guys all know about consulting, but I'll just quickly go over it very quickly. Basically, the company I worked for is called LEK Consulting. They still exist today. They have offices all over the world. And what they do is they advise very senior executives on key strategic issues. Should we enter into a market? Should we develop a new product? Should we purchase another company? Should we be acquired by another company? Those kind of really high level decisions that they just need a sounding board or another opinion on, or maybe they just need a third party opinion. Maybe their board of directors that said, before we do anything, let's get a third party to evaluate this decision for us. So we were the team that would come in and do that. And I got an opportunity to work in electric utilities, manufacturing, internet companies. It was a great experience. And when I was there, I became really fascinated by the world of business, and I decided to apply to business school. So, and one other thing before getting into business school was that job offered me an opportunity to work overseas in one of their international offices. So I did get a chance to work in London for about 7-8 months. So that was also a good experience. So then I applied to business school. Alhamdulillah, I got into Harvard. So then I quit my job. I went for a 2-year full-time MBA program. You can do different styles of MBA programs. You can do a part-time where you kind of work during the day and take classes at night. But I did the full-time program, which is basically quit everything and do this for 2 years. While I was in Boston getting my MBA, the internet collapsed in the 2001 time. We had the kind of internet 1.0, and a bunch of companies just fell apart. The NASDAQ crashed. And when I got to business school, in my mind, I said, whatever I do, I should do the opposite of technology, because that just seems to be a completely failed effort. And, it was just a big mistake and it's collapsed and it'll never come back. Of course, that's wrong. But I just thought to myself, what's the opposite of technology? And I felt that real estate would be it, something that you can touch and hold, and this is my building. And so really, that was kind of the thinking. I just found real estate kind of interesting. I found it secure. When I read about it in terms of as a wealth creating opportunity, a lot of wealth has been created in real estate. So I thought that would be a good opportunity for me. So between my first and second year of business school, I got a summer internship with a real estate company called Starwood Capital, based out of New York. I worked there for a summer. I enjoyed it. And then I came for my second year of business school. And after I graduated, I had a few different offers, job offers. And some were with big real estate companies, some were with very small real estate companies. And I was deciding between a couple different options. And when that happened, I actually received a call from a friend of mine who was a few years younger than me, he was a friend of mine from Northwestern. And he said, Abbas, I'm actually applying to business school. Do you mind helping me with my essays? And I said, yeah, sure, no problem. And after I helped him with his essays, and alhamdulillah, he also got into Harvard and went there, and now he works at Google. But he asked me, what are you going to do after you graduate? And I said, I'm actually thinking about going into real estate. And he said, I have an uncle, and this is a Muslim brother. And he said, I have an uncle who works in real estate, and you may want to speak with him. And he lives in Dallas. And I said, you know what, that's really interesting, because I'm actually going to Dallas next week, because one of the companies that has given me an offer has invited me to meet with their CEO, and he's based out of Dallas. So I'm going to be there anyway, and I'll just stop by and see him, and maybe I can get some advice. Lesson learned here is, when you have an opportunity to meet with people and get advice, seize the opportunity. You don't know where that's going to go. So I go to Dallas, I finish my meetings, and I call him and I say, I'm friends with your nephew. He told me that I could get some advice from you. I'm just graduating from business school and I'm entering the world of real estate. And he said, sure, come to my office. Second lesson, be generous with your time. He was generous with me and gave me a lot of advice. So I met with him, and he said, yeah, I know, I'm familiar with the companies you have job offers with, and they're big and they're very prestigious, and you'll be fine there. But what they're going to do is they're going to give you kind of, this is your box and you should work in this box. You should think about working at a small company where there's just not enough people and there's too much work and you get to do everything. And I said, okay, interesting. And then he said, you should just come work for me. And I thought about it and I said, this is a Muslim uncle. He's successful. I don't know him, but I have a good feeling about it. And I flew home and, I talked to my wife about it. And I said, I have a good feeling about this place. And they're actually paying me less. They're actually paying me less than what I was making before I went to business school. So that was also a convoluted decision, right? Like, I was making good money. I go to business school hoping that when I come out, I'll make even more money, but I accepted a job that made even less money. But I accepted the job, I moved to Dallas, and I learned a ton. The first day I got there, he said, we're buying this shopping center and we're negotiating a lease with JCPenney, the department store. And I want you to just take the lead on it. And I said, I've never negotiated a lease before, let alone, and back then JCPenney was kind of a big deal. And he said, you're smart, you're educated, you'll figure it out. I said, well, shouldn't we have like a lawyer do this? He said, that's at the end. I'm not going to spend a lot of money on lawyers. You run the negotiation. And literally no experience. I'm negotiating with people on the other side that have decades of experience on, multi-million-dollar lease. And that's how I learned, right? He just threw me into the deep end. And I learned so much so fast. After a couple of years, my wife and I were blessed with a son, Hassan Ali, some of you know him. And we quickly realized that being away from family is a problem. Another lesson to learn, right? It especially hits as you get a little bit older and you have children. And if you're living in a city where you don't know anyone or don't have any family, it's a tough place to live. So alhamdulillah, I was fortunate I got a job in Chicago. And then after that, I worked in a few different real estate companies. We were, small companies, big companies. But after a while, I decided to start my own business. And when you start your own business, especially what I do in real estate is, real estate is a very broad field. We can talk about that in a little bit. But what I do is I purchase buildings, right? We raise capital and we buy an apartment building, a shopping center, an office building, whatever it is. And hopefully that investment is profitable, right? You buy a building for $5 million, hopefully you can sell it for $6 million after you fix it or improve it, whatever. And I started calling people and say, hey, I'm starting my own business. I'm raising some capital to purchase buildings. Would you be interested in investing with me? And this is another lesson we can get into all of these is having tawakkul, because I had no idea if people would invest with me. But I just said, Allah will open the doors and we'll make it happen. And I called these people in Dallas, who I always had a good relationship with, right? Even though I left them and moved to Chicago, always had a very positive relationship. And I said, I'm starting my own business. Would you be interested in investing with me? And they said, we never wanted you to leave in the first place. Why don't you come back and work in Dallas? And I said, no, I'm here in Chicago. I'm well established. I'm not coming back to Dallas. But we just started talking and they said, yes, we'll invest with you. And, you kind of help us with our opportunities. Maybe you see some good deals in Chicago, some real estate opportunities, show them to us and we'll put the money in and, we'll split the profits, whatever it is. And that just opened up a lot of doors for me, right? Because now I had a major financial backer and we can go and, it doesn't matter if the opportunity is 5 million or 50 million, we have the balance sheet to go and do it. So now what I do now is I evaluate real estate opportunities, make sure that they're, is it a good, sound investment? And after we purchase the property, I oversee everything that goes on, right? Whether it's leasing spaces to tenants, making sure the expenses are in line, right? If you own an office building, there's so many expenses in maintaining it. So I keep a track on those. Figuring out when to sell it, who to sell it to. These are all decisions that I make on a day-to-day basis. So on any given day, I'm talking to a tenant, I'm talking to a lawyer, I'm talking to a vendor, I'm talking to an investor. Every day is different, but it's very, very exciting. So that's what I do now. That was a long-winded way of how I got here, but we can pivot on any spot you want to, Sheikh Rizwan, and go into more detail.
Yeah. And let me open it up to you all, because there are a lot of different things that you said and did that might have piqued people's interest. So if you have anything you want to ask them to talk more about, then why don't you jump in?
Yeah, and I can speak about management consulting as well. I did it for 3 years. If you guys have any interest or questions on that, what the lifestyle is like, I can definitely address that as well.
Yeah. I feel like this has been a common theme that we've seen with all the people we brought on, almost all. They didn't really have necessarily a clear trajectory going into life. And it's kind of meandered through, opportunities came, they took it, switched tracks, like all sorts of things like that. And I think your experience also echoes the same. Is that, yeah, that's pretty standard. That's the way life is. Like even in a career, it doesn't seem like many people have a clear trajectory unless they're maybe like a doctor or something like that, where there is kind of a path laid out for you.
Absolutely. And really it can take you on an emotional roller coaster, right? If you don't have, and I went through it myself, right? Like in 2000, you guys are all too young to remember, but in 2008, 9, and 10, the real estate market crashed. It crashed hard. The whole financial system collapsed because of real estate. And it was a very difficult time. I didn't know if I would keep my job. I didn't know, it was just very uncertain. And in fact, I almost did lose my job. I got the company I was working for, they basically said, times are tough. We're going to give you two options. One, here's a severance check, goodbye, and we'll see you later. Option two is, we have an office in Los Angeles, and they need some help. You can move there. And I said, give me a day to think about it. And I called all the headhunters. Headhunters are recruiters that I knew. And I said, what do I do? Do you guys have any opportunities in Chicago? They said, are you kidding? There's nothing open. Like, everyone's getting laid off. Like, if you have something, hang on to it. So my family and I, we moved to Los Angeles for a year and a half, or about a year. And Sheikh Rizwan can speak about this much more eloquently than I do, but it's in times like that when these things are completely out of your control and you don't know when your risk is, where it's coming from, and you just have to, you can stress about it, or you can just say, Allah has always provided for me and he'll continue to do so, and lead a much less stressful life.
I don't know. And that's the situation. How do you know not to just quit? Like, this is the wrong path, and now this is this is time to switch tracks and go somewhere else and do something different.
So when that happened, I told myself inside, I never want to be in a position where someone can fire me. And I'm not ready yet, but that was the thinking, where I can't be working for anyone, because you can't just go into work one day and then, like, I mean, you can do that, and people do that, but for me, it's something that I never wanted to go through. And that's why a few years later, I started my own shop.
Musa?
I apologize if you guys can hear any background noise. I'm at the masjid.
It's clear.
I actually remember when you guys had moved to Los Angeles. I was wondering, how does your knowledge with the Chicago and presumably Dallas real estate market translate to a city like Los Angeles, where it's wildly, as I'm assuming, wildly different from Chicago or the suburbs?
That's a great question. So in real estate, specifically what I do, right? Like, I purchase properties. When you think about real estate, and I'm really talking about commercial real estate, because I think when people say real estate, they think about the homes in your neighborhood, right? And that's not what I do at all. When you think about commercial real estate, go downtown, you see the office buildings, you go to the shopping center, you see large apartment complexes, hotels, self-storage facilities, industrial buildings, warehouses. That's all commercial real estate. It's a completely different world than single family homes. One of the things that we focus on as purchasers of real estate is, who are the tenants, right? Because I could have two buildings, they're exactly the same, right? They're both, let's say, 100,000 square feet. They're both built at the same time. One is leased by Walmart on a 10-year lease. One is empty. Which one is worth more? Well, the one with Walmart in it, because they're paying you rent. This is empty. It's not making any rent. In fact, I'm paying money to keep the lights on, the insurance, the property tax, etc. This is almost a liability, while the Walmart is a great asset because it's a 10-year lease, it's secure. Now, if that lease wasn't Walmart and instead it was, Hassan Ali's thrift store, that building is suddenly worth a lot less because there's no credit there. So in terms of the different markets, Musa, in the commercial real estate world, geography doesn't matter so much, and you can learn it very quick, right? What's more important is the tenants, the quality of the credit of those tenants. That's really what's going to drive the value and the opportunity. Of course, we learn about the market, right? Like, I know that, okay, Compton is not going to be as good as Beverly Hills, or the South Side of Chicago is not going to be as good as the North Shore. I mean, we obviously take those into consideration, but it's not like you need to understand the micro, the micro sub-market challenges or opportunities in each neighborhood. For example, we're in the process of purchasing a property up in Buffalo, a 3-property portfolio, Buffalo, Rochester, and Syracuse. I know nothing about those areas, but I flew out there, I looked at the buildings, I looked at the tenants, I got enough of a flavor, I can make an educated decision. So the geography doesn't matter so much in what I do.
We had Sayyid Suleiman come in, and one of the things he said was get into a business where you profit when other people are, happy and flourishing. So like one of the counterexamples would be like going to foreclosures. Like, people are suffering and losing their homes, and you go in and you make a profit off of that. Do you feel that tension? Are you able to kind of focus on,
No, I mean, we
the
don't buy
positive?
single family homes, so that's not
Not single
really.
family, but like businesses also go bankrupt and things like that. And is there a similar kind of flipping market in your field?
No, not really. In fact, when people go south, we probably hurt more than them, or just as much. Because, for example, let's say I own a shopping center, and that tenant goes bankrupt, right? They can't pay the rent anymore. Well, what am I supposed to do? I don't get the rent anymore. Now, I guess what you could do is you could be the type of landlord and say, look, mister, I have this lease. It says you're supposed to pay me this much rent for the next 5 years. I don't care if you went bankrupt. You still owe me money. One, we don't do that. Two, it's very hard to enforce. The legal system here is very much in favor of the tenants. Even if I took the guy to court, I would lose. And three, the bankruptcy laws would protect them anyway, even if I was successful in getting a judgment against them. So we really don't have that type of opportunity to kind of, beat down on the downtrodden. But on the flip side, what Sayyid Suleiman's advice was do something where you make money when other people make money. That's kind of like what we have. In fact, I'll give you an example, right? So let's say we buy a building for $5 million and I don't make money, and I raise the money from others, right? Because I don't have $5 million in my pocket. So I'll go to 10 different people. I'll go to these people down in Dallas. I'll go to some others and I'll say, let's raise $5 million and we're going to buy this building. The way my compensation works is that I don't make any money until I give them back their $5 million after we sell the property, plus some sort of return, right? We have some agreed upon, or 5%, 10%, whatever it is. So let's say you were to give me money to purchase a building, I would, we would buy the building, you would get the rental income, and then only at the end, when we sell the building, you get all of your money back, plus some agreed upon return. Then whatever's left over, I get a piece of that, right? So if that property actually loses money, I make zero. Even if the investors get back their money, but still don't make the agreed upon return, I still don't make any money. So I really pray that my investors make a lot of money, because then I'll make some too.
That's true. Yahya and then Ahmed.
Salam. So I had a question, kind of going back to your time in consulting. So what skills do you think you had that benefited you, or that you wish you had that you think would be something worth developing while in college?
Yeah, so management consulting and investment banking are basically the two major tracks that business majors, econ majors go to after graduating from undergrad. It's a fantastic time, those 2-3 years after you graduate from undergrad, to learn how businesses work. So one thing that you learn a lot in management consulting, especially the strategic management consulting that we did, I'm not talking about like systems implementation and things like that, that's completely different. Or investment banking, financial modeling skills, right? Like the way we use Microsoft Excel to build financial models, scenario planning. If this happens and this will happen, let's financially project what will happen if certain things happen or don't happen. That skill set you don't learn in undergrad. You'll learn that on the job. Making presentations, writing memos, communicating to your peers or people that are above you. Huge lesson learned, right? Like when I want to introduce an investment opportunity to a potential investor, I'm calling them, but I'm also making a pitch book, right? I'm writing an investment memo, which very clearly outlines, this is the opportunity, these are the risks, these are the benefits. This is all the financial analysis that we've done. We put the charts, the tables, the graphs, all that stuff is put together. And you learn a lot of that in management consulting. The other thing that you get exposure to is a wide variety of industries, right? I tell you, I worked in healthcare, utilities, technology, et cetera. You'll get to sample what these businesses are all about. And after a couple of years of doing that, you may have worked in a dozen different industries, and you can say, you know what, I'm really interested in consumer products, right? And maybe your client will say, hey, we're actually looking for someone from this consulting firm to join us, right? So it's a nice opportunity to get exposure to different industries and potentially use that as a stepping stone to go into another industry. The other thing that's really good about management consulting is that most people end up, if you want to go get a graduate degree, and we can discuss whether or not it's worth it or not worth it to get one, but if that's something you want to get, business schools, I would say more than half the classes, former consultants and investment bankers. So if you want to go get your MBA from a top tier school, it's not a bad place to end up going.
Let me just piggyback off of this question before I go to Ahmed. So you have a particular kind of personality. And you also probably learn things, in school and along the way. To what extent, to what extent is your success based on your personality and like natural skills you have, like communication or just being social or those kinds of things, and versus like things that you can learn?
That's a great question. I think for what I do personally, I know people who are much smarter than me, like they'll get better grades and their math skills are a lot stronger. Like, how much math do I really need to do to, evaluate a real estate opportunity? It's addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. There's no multivariable calculus going on here. So you don't need that level of intellectual horsepower, but I need to be able to talk to someone and explain to them in a way that they would understand this is the opportunity. All of my investors are not real estate people. So I need to be able to describe to them and explain to them in a way that they will understand. So I'd say communication, presentation, and making yourself available, approachable, and come off in a way where people will actually trust you and say, okay, this person knows what they're doing. I can trust my hard-earned money with them. Those skills are really important. I would say equal, if not more than, the intellectual rigor, because intellectually it's not very difficult what I do.
I'm just thinking for them, like, some people are suited, or it seems like they might be suited for a particular kind of job.
Yeah.
Like, what can you think of some indicate? Like, so these are sound like being good with people, communicating.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. We have some people, that are more kind of introverted, more analytical, they can do a fantastic piece of analysis. They shouldn't do what I do, right? It would be very, very difficult for them. They may be better off working, at a hedge fund, right? Where they sit there and they analyze so many different stock opportunities. And then, you don't need to go talk to people. You can go trade the stocks on your desk. Those, and I know people who do that. They're introverted, they're brilliant, and they sit behind 4 computer screens all day looking at investment opportunities, like trading, stocks, bonds, whatever. And they make millions of dollars doing that. But I think if you want to do something that's more, I'm going to raise my own capital, start my own business, go out and get my own customers. If your natural disposition is to be an introvert and not want to get out there and talk to people, I think it's a bit more challenging.
Yeah. Ahmed?
So like you talked about like having like property out like somewhere out west, somewhere out east, right? So you would not deal those by yourself, and you have like a property manager for each property? And
Absolutely.
So like how many people would you have per property, and like how much would you be paying them out of your own pocket?
That's a great question. Yeah. So, after we buy, let's use the example of a shopping center, right? I can own it, but I don't need to run it. I don't need to be there and collect the rent and make sure the sidewalk is clean and the parking lot is, shoveled. And I don't do any of that. I outsource it. And there are companies, all they do is property management. And that's the really kind of interesting thing about my business, is that everything is outsourced. I outsource the accounting, I outsource the property management. Really, all I do is make investment decisions and talk to my investors. Everything else I hire other people to do. So I don't have like a big staff or a payroll, that I need to worry about. So there are companies that do this, right? I don't have my own legal team. I just hire a lawyer. And you pay them, it all depends what you pay them, right? It varies, but usually it's a percentage of the revenue. So if the building generates $10 million in revenue a year, they get 3% of it or something like that as their property management fee. So that's also an interesting about real estate, is that you can be like me, just like an individual, but outsource a lot of the day-to-day heavy lifting, the grunt work to other people, because it's not a good use of our time to do it.
I saw another hand. Was it Musa? Yeah, Musa. Go ahead.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
So I don't know how much of this is you'd want to share, but what is like your day-to-day look like as reaching out to investors? How much of the properties do you manage? How do you, I guess, find properties? How much do you have to travel to take a look at the properties and analyze how much they're worth and things like that?
Sure. Yeah, so every day is different, right? So, and I do a little bit of all of those every day, except for the travel. Travel is usually day trips, and it is what it is. But in terms of any given day, let's say I have 30 properties, right? On any given day, 20 of them I don't need to really think about. They're fine. 10 of them will have some issues. Maybe on one of them I need to go talk to a tenant. For the second one, I will need to go talk to a property manager because they came to me last week and they said the roof on this building is terrible. We need to spend $100,000 replacing the roof. Okay, so I'm going to take that's a big decision. So I need to take some time out, understand it, talk to the property manager, approve or not approve it, or make sure we're making the right decision. On the fourth property, we may have received an offer, so I need to evaluate. Do I want to sell this? Do I not want to sell it? On the seventh property, I may have a tenant who hasn't paid rent in 6 months. Well, why haven't they paid rent in 6 months? Talk to the property manager. What's going on? Do we need to evict them because they're sitting there operating and they're just not paying the rent? Like, we've had people like that. They're just not nice people where they'll take advantage. And those people, you need to then talk to the lawyer and get them evicted. Okay, well, now I need to grow my business. If I have an hour, I have brokers that call me. Brokers are basically salespeople who call me and say, Abbas, we saw that you bought a shopping center in Glenview. I have another shopping center available for you in Naperville. Would you be interested? And I always say, yes, I'm interested. And, I spend some time talking to them and then I have to evaluate that opportunity. So every day I do a little bit of everything. Some days you get bogged down, just focus on one thing or the other, but every day is very different. And in terms of the travel specific question, it's really only when needed, right? Okay, we want to go buy that property, let's go travel and see it. And usually it's just a day trip. Real estate doesn't require a lot of travel. Management consulting, on the other hand, tons of travel. 4 days a week, every week for forever, right? So and that was one of the reasons I decided not to do it anymore.
When you have so many different tasks to handle, are you able to stop and focus on other family and religion, other kinds of things, or it's always in your mind and you're always busy thinking of work? I mean, you don't have to say personally, but is it possible?
Yeah, no, it's always on your mind, right? It's always on your mind. And, I try to be involved in our community and things like that. We have our full-time school, which I'm involved in, and other, organizations that I do participate in. And so I do carve out the time for that, but ultimately, yeah, it's always on my mind.
Okay, but you are able to take vacations. You're able to kind of go away, so that it is possible to kind of separate.
I go for ziyarat and umrahs, and no problem.
What happens at those periods when you're away? This device is
fantastic.
I see.
You're able to do so many things, right? I mean, really, my job isn't sitting in front of a computer screen. It's answering emails. It's talking on the phone. Question comes in. If I'm unable to answer it, I forward that email to someone who I know who can answer it. Or there's an issue at a property, someone will call me or send me an email. So really, as long as I have an internet connection and to make a phone call, and everything is so easy right now, right? I need to read a lease, right? Like this tenant come with a big issue. I need to see their lease. Okay, well, it's stored on the cloud. I have a Box account. I can pull it up on my phone and look at that section very easily. I don't need to be near a file cabinet and open it and things like that. So in this day and age, you can be literally anywhere as long as you're connected.
Right. Zain Labadin?
In terms of investing, what goes into your decision when you invest into certain properties? Is there a certain criteria you follow?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great question. So really, I have two big ones. One is don't lose money, right? You don't want to buy that property for 5 million and then sell it for 4 million. So what are all the things that could go wrong with this property? Well, a tenant could leave. Okay, if tenants come and go, that's fine. But if, let's say, tenant A is, Dick's Sporting Goods, and they're paying me $5 a square foot to rent the space. Okay, fine. Let's say Dick's would leave. Can I rent out that space again for $5 a square foot? Well, I need to do a little bit of research. What is the rent in this area? If it's at $5 a square foot or higher, great. Actually, if it's lower, then I'm thinking, man, if Dick's leaves, I'm only going to be able to replace that tenant from $5 to $3. Now my building is worth less, right? Because I bought it, it was generating $5, and I'm only going to get $3. So my building has lost value. So I'm always looking to figure out, how does this property become worth less? Once I figure that out and I'm comfortable with the downside risk, then I look for the upside risk. Okay, how can we make money here? Okay, well, this shopping center, it's only 80% occupied. I still have opportunity to lease up some spaces. I can, bring in some more tenants and make the property more valuable that way. Or maybe the building is kind of run down. I could improve it, make it better, bring in some better, higher quality tenants. So that's when you start looking at the upside. But for me, what I never want to do is call an investor and say, I'm sorry, we lost your money, or we lost a portion of your money. Alhamdulillah, I haven't done it. Inshallah, I will never do it. But that's why I really focus on the downside.
Very good. Ahmed and then Musa.
So piggybacking off of Musa's question, you said that if you have to evict a tenant or something, right? So would it be harder to evict a bigger name tenant, for example, like something like a Walmart, versus something like a small mom and pop shop that's just not paying their rent on time?
Yeah, so that's a great question. The good thing about the big tenants, except for a few of them that have bad reputations, they generally honor the lease, right? We have a signed document. It says that you'll take this space for this many years and pay this much in rent. And 90% of the time, you have no issues with them. 10%, like during COVID, everything kind of fell apart because some tenants were very easy to work with. And they said, look, we know we're closed, but we'll still pay the rent. Right? Other tenants are like, we're closed because of the lockdown and we won't pay the rent. And, you figured out some sort of settlement. But aside from those once in a lifetime type of things, these big, we call them credit tenants because they're big. They're kind of, when they sign something, they're good for it. But we have mom and pop tenants too, right? And some of them are not good people and some of them are good people. And some of them just are unlucky, and you get all sorts. And you can make kind of decisions based on what the circumstances are, right? If someone comes to you and says, Abbas, I can't pay the rent, or I need the lower rent, I sit down with them. I say, okay, what's the problem? Let's figure this thing out together. I don't want to lose the tenant. I want to keep the tenant. So, maybe we figure out some sort of payment plan or something like that. But if these guys are just being, taking advantage of a very kind of tenant-friendly legal system and just not paying rent because they don't have to, and not honor the lease that they themselves signed, yeah, then we lawyer up and we go after them.
I guess, let's pivot a little bit and focus on kind of big picture things and maybe even education. Can I ask you about, actually, Musa, do you have a detailed question, or is it kind of a more general question?
It's a little bit more detailed.
So how about if if it's a detail like how the business works, then maybe let's push that off, and I can
Yeah.
put you in touch with him kind of through the Telegram group if you want.
All right. Yeah, that works better.
But Abbas, could you speak to like in college, what are some things that they should do while they're in college to set themselves up for success in your field, or like the fields that you kind of dabbled in or specialized in later on?
Yeah. So in my field, and I think a lot of the business world, and I'm sure you've heard this before, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And it's also what you know as well. You can be kind of empty, but who you know is very important. Every single job that I got was because I knew someone there, right? Like the last job that I worked at, before I started my own company, I was working for Penny Pritzker. You know, she's a billionaire. Was a Secretary of Commerce under Barack Obama. Like we used to fly around on her private jet. Like it was a really cool person to work for. How did I get that job? It's not like she puts up a job posting on LinkedIn and you get it. I knew a guy who was like, her head of real estate, right? And I met him at conferences. I spoke with him. We really hit it off. And he called me one day. He's like, hey, I think we need to expand our team. Do you want to join? And that's how I got that job. And people would always ask, like, how did you get a job there? Obviously, alhamdulillah, everything comes from Allah, right? But in terms of the mechanics of how that worked, it was staying in touch with people, talking to people. So when you are where you guys are right now in college, talk to your professors. These guys have students that graduated 4, 5, 6 years before you that are well placed in these organizations, and they may be able to open up doors for you, right? In our business school, a lot of the professors, they were professors and they were consultants to their advisors or on the board of directors of other companies, right? These people are at the top of their field. They know what's going on. Meet them, develop a personal relationship with them, and then ask them, right? It's like, hey, I'm trying to get into this field. What's your advice? And he may tell you, oh, one of my students is now working at that company. I'll put you in touch. Go meet that person for coffee. Go have lunch with them. Try meet them face to face. If not, do a phone call. And then stay in touch with them, right? A year can go by. Drop them a note. Hey, I was just remembering we met a year ago for lunch. Just want to let you know I really appreciated your time. Hope all is well. It takes you literally 30 seconds, but that will, that person will get that email like, oh yeah, I remember I met with that young man or woman, and actually I need someone right now. And they may reach out to you and say, hey, what are you doing these days? Why don't you come in and we'll talk about an opportunity. So really I know it's just networking, but it has to be done kind of in a genuine fashion, but it also has to be thoughtful. Like you need to talk to people who are decision makers. So don't network with people who are kind of, I don't know what the right word is, but not going to be kind of very useful for you. I mean, obviously, if they're nice people, be their friend, whatever, but just be thoughtful of who you're spending your time with and who you're going to be networking with. But
So this
where
is
you are in
different from
college,
friendship.
I would say take advantage of the faculty.
Okay, so this is different from friendships. You're not talking about horizontal relationships with peers. This is with
vertical.
people in power positions. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Any questions on that, like on networking and those kinds of things? Another issue.
I want to spend a little bit of time on that, Sheikh. That's right. So one of the things that we, as Muslims need to be careful for in networking is where the networking takes place, what's the environment.
Yeah.
And this is one of the reasons why I actually didn't continue in management consulting. There's a lot of alcohol out there, right? And I mean, I guess even if you're a doctor or a dentist, there's going to be social events, things like that, where there's going to be alcohol. But I feel like it's even more so in the business world, right? Like,
can you give a picture? Like, what is the event like? What do you have to go to do this?
Yeah, so there could be like, and I don't go to these, but I get invited to all of them. Real estate happy hour. People that I do business with all get together once a month at some sort of bar or hotel lounge or whatever, and they have a happy hour. What's a happy hour? Happy hour is they sit around with a glass of wine or beer or whatever, and they sit there and they talk. It's great for networking, but there's no barakah in that for us, right? So we have to, and it's not an easy decision to make. I mean, it is easy, but it's also not easy. Like, oh my God, all these guys are wheeling and dealing and making connections, and I'm not there. So, you know, that's out there, right? So what I have done in my career is I said, look, I can't do these happy hour networking events. I'm prohibited from doing that. So what I do is I call them like, hey man, I'd like to buy you lunch. And generally people don't drink at lunch, right? I mean, they all got to go back to work. And those one-on-one connections, I think, are a lot more effective than sitting around 10 people all, you know, talking very loudly or whatever. So you'll see this as you get older and older, wine and cheese socials, whatever it is, right? They'll start popping up in college. You just need to be a lot more creative in terms of making those opportunities where you can, because you got to talk to these people, right? But you got to do it in an environment which works for us. And so that's going to take a little creativity on your end.
Any other questions from you all? So besides networking, what other what else, like the summers that they have to kind of fill with activity? What are some things that they can do?
Yeah, internships are so important, right? I mean, they not only do they fill up your resume, they can turn into full-time offers. Like in my university, Northwestern, we have this thing called field studies, where the university would actually place you in a company. And you go there and you work there and you get like a grade, like an A, B, C. I think they always give you an A, but you get class credit for it. You don't get paid, but you get class credit. For the employer, it's really good because they evaluate you. If they like you, they'll give you an offer. And for you, it's good because you're evaluating them, right? The nice thing about where you guys are, you're young, you're not really desperate for a job. You don't need to get a paycheck to provide for, you know, your wife and kid or spouse and child, whatever. So you can be a little bit choosy too. Like, you know, I went there, it's not for me. That's fine. You know, you can use this opportunity to evaluate what you like and what you don't like, or you like that field, you don't like that company. But yeah, internships, summer jobs are huge. And how do you get those? Networking. You know, you come to people like me, you come to people like other ones that Sheikh Rizwan can introduce you to, and you talk to them and you say, I want to learn more about law. I want to learn more about dentistry. And we have these people in our community, alhamdulillah, that they will be so excited to try help you, right? And that's the way you do it, because if you're saying, oh, well, you know, there was a job posting and I just applied for it. Well, you applied for it with 500 other people. Inshallah, you get it, but that's not necessarily the most effective way to go get a job, right? It's more talking to someone who knows someone who can get you in. Yeah, so I think, you know, networking with your faculty, networking with alumni, getting these student internships, work study, field studies, whatever it is, that type of exposure is really important.
And does that work to explore? Like that's the way to explore fields as well. Like if I don't know what I'm going to be doing,
exactly.
I don't have an interest yet, so I try to dabble in different things, or
yeah,
how do you
would
find
say
your
that,
way?
you know, try rule things out that you know you don't want to do, but if you're like, look, I'm deciding between marketing and, you know, financial modeling, like what should I get into? Well, okay, now you've narrowed down to two, try get an internship in each of those. And if you're really kind of ambitious, try to get 2 summer internships. Like, you know, I'll work in June through mid-July at one job, mid-July to the end of August in the other. I knew a lot of people that did that, and that was a really good idea.
Is that these are more important than like study abroad or those kinds of academic opportunities, you think?
I maybe not after your freshman year. After your freshman year, you can kind of do that stuff, but I would say, especially after your junior year, 100%. I mean, you should be doing internships. It gets more and more important as you get closer to graduation.
Musa?
I had a question more related towards when you were talking about internships and things like that. What is one way where you can find those internships? Because like you can look on Indeed or ZipRecruiter or whatever for these internships, but they're always like a small local firm or something. How do you find internships outside of these really small ones or places that will actually help your resume out?
So good question. So your university will have some sort of office of employment or something like that, where different companies actually come in to recruit students from your school. So definitely look into that. I know at Northwestern, for example, we had hundreds of employers coming in every year through this office with job opportunities, both summer internships and full-time opportunities. So I think that's really good to do. In my field of real estate, a lot of because it's so kind of networky and they kind of hire who they know type of thing, there's not a lot of on-campus recruiting. What I did to understand who the big players are is there are these associations, right? So there is an association within real estate. There's the Pension Fund Real Estate Advisory Committee. These are all people who invest on behalf of pension funds. There's people who just do apartments, the National Multi-Housing Council. There is the International Center of Shopping Centers, or International Council of Shopping Centers, right? There's these industry organizations which have members. Find out whatever industry you're interested in. I promise you they have an industry association, whether they're CPAs, they're doctors, dentists. Within real estate, there are so many. Within law, there are so many, right? Find out what these associations are, get onto their website, look at who the members are. Usually the big members are the ones who have the big pockets. And they're the ones that can probably hire more people than the small mom and pops. So and then you start networking. You're like, okay, I saw this company, right? They're well represented in this association. Who do I know that works there? And that's when you start doing your own internal networking, or you just cold call them. Or some of them have job opportunities just posted on their website. Work all the angles. But what I have found is that industry organizations and associations are very helpful in getting to know who the players are in that particular field.
Were you always able to call people so easily and talk to them so easily, or did you have to kind of work up the courage for it?
Yeah, I mean, it never came easy for me. I did a lot of role playing.
Just on your own, or how with peers?
Yeah, with my wife, with a friend, whoever. To this day, I do role playing.
Can you explain that? What's that process like?
Okay, so this past Friday, we're trying to buy a shopping center in Texas, and the seller was deciding between our company and somebody else. We both offered them a lot of money, good terms, etc., but they weren't sure like who's really gonna eventually close on the property. Because I could put a property under contract, research it. You know what? I'll pass. I give you my offer, but now I'm withdrawing my offer. They want to know a company who gives the offer and is going to close on it in 30 days, right? And so they interviewed us. And this is a company, the seller is someone who I had never done business with. And so we role played, me and my analyst and another colleague of ours. We said, okay, what questions could they ask us? And let's role play those answers. And that was it. And it was rehearsal, right? And a lot of those questions came up on the phone, and we were ready for them, right? And we did a really good job in the interview. And alhamdulillah, they awarded us the property. So we'll be buying it in the next 60 days. But being prepared is so important. And for people who are kind of naturally a little bit more nervous, more hesitant in terms of talking to people, rehearsing, role playing, writing out the answers, then saying them out loud, it makes a world of difference. And look, I've gone through I've been doing this for like 20 years now, but I'm still role playing, rehearsing, because it's so important.
Musa?
This applies, this is a question more about the field as a whole. How much of getting into the field is just, put your nose down and just do all the work? And how much of it do you kind of have to, kind of enjoy it or like the process? Like medicine, you can kind of just, put your nose down and just study all the textbooks, take all the classes and do everything and get through school. How much of this field is that? And how much of it is you actually have to have some passion in what you're doing?
Yeah, because there's no like.
Well, is it about
Right.
passion, or it's like, is there a clear course? Like in medicine, you have a clear course. You just have to kind of follow the road that's already been laid for you.
Yeah,
Versus this, where you have to find your own path.
Yeah, more in
Like
that
you
sense.
can have passion or dispassion in both areas, I think, right?
Yeah, even in medicine, you can put your nose down and study through school to get your MD. How much of this field is more just put your nose down? How much of it is you actually have to figure stuff out on your own?
Yeah,
it's all the latter. There's no credentialing. There's no entrance exam. There's no MCAT. There's nothing. I work with people who, did basket weaving majors but they don't know anything about anything, but they're really good at this stuff, right? They understand it. So yeah, there's no, like what Sheikh was like, is there a path? Like you take these 4 courses, take this test, get into this program, and then you become a doctor. There's nothing like that. You can start doing it tomorrow. It may be difficult because you don't have all the expertise and the experience, but yeah, there is really no certification or anything. Now, there are other areas in the real estate world, right? You could be a broker, right? A broker is someone, these guys make a ton of money, right? What they do is they say, we're going to sell the John Hancock building, right? Let's say I own the John Hancock building and I want to sell it. Well, how do I do that? I call a broker. I say, hey, Mr. Broker, I own the John Hancock building. Go sell it for me. And they'll go talk to people with big, deep pockets, and they will find the buyer and they'll say, this is the buyer. And I got you the best price and the best terms. You're going to pay you $1 billion for the building. But that guy gets 2% of the commission. And these commissions on these $100 million projects, 2% is a lot of money. And they do that, like 1 a month, right? So they make a lot of money, right? But to do that, you need to actually take some tests and be certified so that, you're doing, it's like that in single family homes, right? You get a broker and you have take some sort of real estate license exam or something like that. So there's certain parts of the job where, yeah, you actually do need to get a license. But to invest and say, hey, I'm going to go spend money and buy a building, there's no criteria. Anyone can do it.
I asked you this question before when we were talking with Yahya, but you have like there are 2 models of work where one is the work itself is fulfilling, even though it may not be, usually they're not well paying, and on the other side you have very lucrative jobs that may be meaningless, but you can do good things with the money if you have if you're able to kind of shape your intention and keep that grounded.
Yeah.
I don't know, how do you navigate that, and like where is your work in that spectrum?
I think it's a bit of both, right? Because we can do some good things in our day job, right? But you have to look for the opportunities. So there are some people in our community. I have an example of it. There was someone from our Masoom Center here in Chicago. Unbeknownst to me, they came to one of our shopping centers and tried to lease some space to do there's a husband and wife, and they have like no money, no credit, mom and pop, from Pakistan, and they want to do like threading or something like that, right? The woman had the skill, like, well, let's start this salon. My property manager came to me and said, this person came, they want to lease some space. I advise that we don't do it. They don't have any credit. They have no money. And I said, show me the application. And I recognized the name, right? I was like, oh, I know these people, Sayed, blah, 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 from this community. I know them. And I said, no, rent them the space. And I said, what's the lowest rent that we can do here? And, we went through numbers that we can even give it at this really low rent and we'll still be okay. No one's eyebrows will be raised. Like, wait a second, why did you my investors would never say, you just gave it away, right? Because I have a responsibility to my investors too. I can't just give away space for free. They don't know who these people are. but I wanted to do something as much as I could while still being true and reliable to my investors, but at the same time help this family, right? And I was able to do that. You know, we did all these COVID test centers, right? It was helpful for our community ultimately, right? And we needed month-to-month leases in shopping centers. You know, I could produce dozens of them. And that ended up helping. So yeah, even in my day job, I'm able to do things that I think are beneficial to helping community and things like that. I do find that fulfilling. Also, the nature of my work is that there's some flexibility in the day, right? So if, you know, like last week, we went to go see another Montessori school, you know, Friday morning, right? If I had like a 9-to-5 job, I got to check in the office, I couldn't do that. So these are things that we can do, A, when you're an entrepreneur, and B, when you kind of you have control, right? Like no one's going to tell me, don't lease that person's space. I disagree with you. Like I'm the decision maker, right? So we can do these things that are helpful for our community. And then obviously, like you said, Sheikh Rizwan, if the money's good, you can, you know, plow that back into, you know, our community projects.
And then if you have this successful, you know, business and life, you become very wealthy. How do you stay kind of grounded and humble and like, I don't know, it's easy if you're making money to live a lavish life, for instance, right?
Yeah.
How can you, I don't know, how have you been able to navigate that?
Yeah. I think that is challenging, actually. I think that is challenging. I think who you surround yourself with really, it matters, right? We hear this all the time, like your friends are your mirror and things like that. And like socially, I don't hang out with any of these real estate people. The investors I have, the other big owners or whoever they are, you know, it's a working hour relationship, but I don't associate with them. And I know they go to these, you know, fantastic vacations and, you know, expensive cars or whatever, whatever they're doing, that's fine. But I think if you want to stay grounded, surround yourselves with good Muslim, you know, believing, practicing friends, because they're your mirror. And I think that's one really good way to do it.
All right, our time is up. Thank you so much.
Wow, that flew by. I enjoyed this so much.
Are you so we have a Telegram group that we just communicate about the class with everyone. Could I plug you into that for a couple of days, and if people have questions, they can contact me.
And Sheikh Rizwan, feel free to share with them my email, phone number. Anytime these guys need me, I'm at their service.
All right, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's my honor. Thank you so much for organizing it.
All right. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, boys. Thank you.